For the advice industry, change is constant, whether it's the economic cycle, political uncertainty, demographic shifts, regulatory change, or the impact of technology. These trends present both threats and opportunities for firms that can adapt and embrace them. To discuss how the industry is evolving to meet these challenges, I'm joined by Dominique Vinicum, Nick Bamford, Elizabeth Rule, Sam Seacombe and Kath Gallagher. Thanks all for joining me this morning and talking about regulatory change, and I guess specifically things like RDR and MiFID II. I'm really interested to understand how you've adapted to those changes and how you foresee that your business is continuing to adapt to regulatory change over the years to come. And Nick, if I could ask you that question.
Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail on the head with the comment about change being constant. So we are all used to change. I don't think, this is a profession. Financial planning isn't a profession to be in unless you're capable of embracing change for all the reasons that you've given. Where are we now? About 30 years after the introduction of Financial Services Act, and we're just having layer upon layer of that change imposed on us all the time. So, all of us sat here are looking forward to December with the senior management and certification regime. I'm sure we're all prepared for that. But yeah, if you're not capable of embracing change, I think it's a very difficult profession to be in.
Yeah, and IFAs, having dealt with IFAs for many, many years, you're a very adaptable bunch. But if I could ask you, Dominique, what your thoughts are on that?
Again, I think, as you said, we do have to be adaptable, but for us it's by pre-planning is what I've found to be the most effective. So there's no point putting your head in the sand. As soon as you know the FCA are going to bring out a new change or new requirements, then you need to start planning for that and putting a process in place rather than waiting to the last minute and then it's a mad dash to try and get everything before the deadline done. So keeping up to date, making sure you know what the FCA, the latest thematic visits are and everything that they're doing, and then planning how that will impact your individual business and putting a process in place for that. Yeah,
and I guess there must be a cost burden here, isn't there? I mean, Liz, has the business incurred massive additional costs as a result of?
Undoubtedly. Just the paperwork you send to clients nowadays used to be a letter, then it used to have a quote, and now it's that thick, and I think more confusing than ever for most people. And to keep up to date with all of it is it's quite hard for staff and for clients.
Okay, thank you. And I guess it's a specific one, but how are people adapting to MiFID II and clients? How are they reacting to all these MiFID II statements that are being sent out, Sam?
I think more paperwork and highlighting to clients when funds have fallen in value and then not telling them when they've risen is actually probably not helping clients understand their products or the risks that they're exposed to. I think MiFID II might have missed the mark. It's just, it looks as if it's just created more paperwork without really informing the client to any much greater extent than they were already informed, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's a common piece of feedback that I hear. And Kath, you work for a much larger business. What's your view on all this?
Yeah, so I am involved in the management of the advice function. So we very much take the lead from our legal and regulatory team. So where I'm probably most involved is making sure that the messages hit the ground in a positive way. People understand what sits behind the legislation so that we can comply to the spirit of the legislation rather than just the letter, because those conversations with clients around, well, look, this is why we're doing this. This is what we're trying to convey to you, and here's some of the context, I think is really important in terms of supporting clients.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to come back to the impact on cost in a few moments, but if I may move us on a little bit to talk about the future advice model and I guess specifically the importance of this independent tag. I mean, I think you all work for businesses that are branded as independent. How important is that tag to you and your clients? Perhaps I'd ask you, Liz.
It runs through us like a stick of rock, the independence. Whether we'll be able to maintain that, I don't know. But with the level of consolidation going on in the market, with vertically integrated firms, I think it's important that a few of us hang out there.
Yeah. What do you think?
I think it would be a terrible shame for clients if independence gets stamped out because it's just too expensive to offer as an option. And I think more retail clients would vote with their feet if they understood the difference. I don't know about my colleagues, but I think that if it was clearer, I think it used to be clearer when we were more polarised. You had restricted and independent, but they were called sales consultants and advisors. And I think at the moment, clients don't know whether they're talking to somebody who's selling products from a small group of providers, or whether they're getting independent advice which is for them, tailored for them, and an independent research of the market. I don't think it's clear to them.
I think it's important when you're taking on new clients, we will very much stress the independence to them, and again it's core to our business. 50 plus years, people would turn in their grave at the thought of not being independent. I think once clients are on board and you've built that strong relationship, it's perhaps less important to them on an ongoing basis as the relationship takes over, but certainly it's very important when talking to new clients, and that they understand that they are getting the breadth and choice and finding what's most appropriate for them.
And would that be your view as well, Kath?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we passionately believe that you can only provide the best advice to clients if you have an independent offering. We're also finding that in terms of recruitment, it's a really, really valuable badge to hold, and I think that's recruitment in terms of experienced advisors who are looking for a home for their existing clients, but actually very much at the younger end of the career ladder as well. We're finding that younger recruits do understand the difference, and it's a real aspiration of theirs to work for an independent advisor.
It's a pretty clear view, but arguably, do you need to be truly independent? I mean, anecdotally, I can tell you we deal with firms who look and feel like independent advisory businesses, but are technically tied.
With respect, that's the problem. They look and feel like independent firms, and they're not. Therein is the problem.
Yeah.
I was going to say, if we want to sort of pack our bags and move from one provider to another, we can. And I think that's important, because one never knows how things will change with a provider that you're using. And if you can't move, that's bad for the client.
Yeah, I think it's about independence of thought more than anything else, and being independent in the way in which you deal with the client. So no preconceived ideas, that you're going into that contact with the client without thinking immediately there's a solution. I think it's also a pity that we have these titles imposed upon us by regulation. They've changed over time. We spoke earlier about being able to cope with change, and of course we're 30 plus years into a regulatory regime that wants to stick labels on people, and I think that's a pity.
Indeed. Well, thank you. That's a pretty unanimous view. I'd like us to move the discussion on a little bit, and I touched on this earlier, and that's the question of pricing. And as I go around the country and meet advisors, I gather that this sort of sense that there is a bit of a mismatch between supply and demand in the market, and I'm not sure whether the market functions as well as it should. And what I mean by that is that there are an awful lot of clients, and perhaps not enough of you to serve them, which means that your businesses have, to a large extent, gone upmarket post RDR. A lot of smaller clients fell out, accelerating the advice gap, which we'll come on to in a moment. But there is a lot of pressure on price. And it's been felt, acutely by people like Funds Network. Platform pricing has come under pressure. I think increasingly asset management pricing has come under pressure, and that's either through you selecting passive funds and voting with your feet, or the distribution of asset management funds being in the hands of a smaller number of people, and therefore price of active management being driven down. In contrast, the price that advisors has been charging has been going up. And I can tell you the average fee on Funds Network pre-RDR, commission as it was about 0.4%, and it's now 0.8%. So that's a trend which we've noticed, and I'd just be interested in your views on that. Is the price inexorably going up as you react to some of these regulatory pressures, or has it reached its ceiling?
Interesting you described the price comparison change there as a percentage. And I would argue that you should convert that into a monetary amount. So it would be interesting to see what that means in terms of cash terms. One of the three prongs of our mantra as a firm is transparency. So we have fixed monetary fees for the financial planning, advice and implementation piece, and we're moving now to a fixed fee for the ongoing charge. We're not experiencing a fantastic amount of pressure, pushback in respect of the fees that we're charging. And I think coming on to why is that the case, it is because we're dealing with those people who have got very complex sets of affairs, who have accumulated lots of assets, have got a real need for professional financial advice, and they will be prepared to pay those fees.
So would you say the absolute price has increased over time, all other things being equal?
I think it has increased, but by virtue of the fact that we're dealing with a different marketplace to the one we were dealing with before. And I think most of the price pressure will start to be exerted will be, I'm afraid, with the platforms and with the fund managers. I think people are quite prepared to pay our fees.
Yeah.
Because you're sort of the invisible part of it that they don't necessarily understand, although I think it's the fund groups that will come under the most pressure. Some people are aware of what their fees are in America and wonder why they're so much greater here for the same functionality from the fund managers. But I agree with Nick. We are an unintended consequence, or perhaps an intended consequence, who knows, with the FCA of RDR, was the widening of the unavailability for what we would call entry level clients. And so yes, our average fees have probably gone up, but because we're dealing, as you said, with a different animal whose needs are different, and therefore it's priced accordingly.
Liz?
The same kind of thing in terms of price. We used to have an offering where we would say to a client, we do have a minimum fee, but what you can do is you can see us every 2 to 3 years if you want. We're designing something that's not going to need much intervention in that time. Now, MiFID, got to have an annual review. So either we orphan the clients, which isn't a great feeling, or they have to pay a lot more to see us annually, which probably isn't required.
So when you mentioned MiFID II, when these MiFID II statements land, are our clients going, crikey, I didn't realise I was paying you that much, or are they reacting magnanimously?
I'm glad to say that my clients don't react like that. They know what they're paying.
They already knew. They knew previously, didn't they? We told them. So.
Yeah, and this is absolutely the reaction we get around the country when we ask that question. But anecdotally, I'm hearing examples from 1 or 2 advisors where clients are knocking on the door, not necessarily as a result of MiFID II, but as a result of market pressure, and saying, well, is there anything we can do to improve the pricing? Is that something that's you're hearing, Kath?
Every engagement with a client, it's important that we articulate what it is that we're doing for that client and demonstrate that we're adding value, etc. And what do clients value most? Probably the relationship aspect of it, and that is what very clearly we hold as advisors. So I think we are seeing challenge around price on product rather than the relationship and advice side of things.
That's interesting. And I'd like to pick on a point that Nick made, actually, and this is this idea of moving from an ad valorem fee to a fixed fee, whether that's an hourly rate or a rate for the job or an annual retainer. Are any of you looking at that sort of model?
Oh, absolutely. I've just launched a brand, actually. It goes live on Monday, where we're charging like a gym membership for your finances, so it's subscription based. In order to cover the upfront costs, there's a minimum term that somebody has to be a member for of 2 years. But we're literally getting it down to kind of 80 quid a month.
If it's gym based, does that mean I don't have to come along?
And I do think I am expecting phone calls which say my financial plan isn't working, and I'll be saying, well, are you actually taking action? But yeah, so bringing a subscription model in which relies heavily on technology, so no paperwork, just communicating with clients screen to screen and using technology to manage the costs. No idea whether it'll work, but we're giving it a go.
And are you aiming that at a particular sector of the market?
Yeah, women. It's called Women's Wealth. I think financial services is quite poor at talking to women generally. I know Fidelity's done quite a lot of work on the subject. It's for younger clients. It's for family ladies. So they may not even have positive net worth. They might be just trying to decide what auto-enrolment fund they should be in and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a different area for us, and we're going to give it a go because we're passionate about trying to do something about the advice gap. We don't want to be hoarding only rich clients. We want to be able to service clients who need independent financial advice rather than leaving them at the mercy of product providers. But we have to find a way of doing it that doesn't cost us money. We're not a charity.
Well, what a great example of that change you were talking about earlier, though, that you can apply that and see a market where you can deliver it. That's really good. Unlike you, though, I'm not interested in the advice gap. I didn't create it. It was a regulatory creation, effectively, a political creation. And I see it as a duty to the clients that we've got, not the ones that can't afford our services, I'm sad to say.
So who do you think has the responsibility to plug the advice gap?
The regulator needs to sort that out. They created the mess, they need to sort it out. You know, it's all very well for a regulator to do what they've done. We all know what the reason for this is. And it's a positive reason for most of our firms, which is a raising of professional standards and disclosure and everything else that went with it. But that's created the so-called advice gap.
So were you the regulator, what steps would you take?
I'm not the regulator, I don't have to worry about that.
Some employers have picked up the baton and feel a moral responsibility to help their employees with their financial planning and decision making, and some don't. So there's a huge disparity there. I think it's also tied in there's an awareness now that financial well-being is tied in with general health and productivity and absenteeism from the workplace. So there's a commercial imperative there for large employers to look at supporting their workforce in terms of financial awareness, certainly, education, certainly. Very few go that further step in terms of empowering them with advice to actually take action.
And I just believe this was a foreseen circumstance. And that's the frustrating thing, that, you know, the regulator should have been aware of the consequences of the change that they were making and should have put things in action to, as you say, as I agreed, it's a regulatory challenge that needs to be addressed.
Well, they thought that people would be queuing up to buy stakeholder products, and they're not. So it is up to them to change.
You mentioned the moral imperative that some employers are feeling, but don't those employers generally end up providing a product-led solution because their platforms run by product providers, generally sitting at the back of the auto-enrolment offering? So
I mean, I think that's a port of call that certainly is probably immediately obvious to them, but we work with a lot of employers in terms of financial education services. It's then, once you've identified or helped individuals identify how to take control of their finances, there is still then that gap in terms of those that want to do that with the support of a financial advisor. And that's when you do come up against the gap. And I wonder if, well, I think that probably way back when there was an expectation that technology would support simplified advice models, and that would be how the advice gap was filled. But nothing's getting any simpler, is it? And I'm sure amongst this room we've tried to fashion simplified models that are more accessible, but then, you know, it's just coming up against the regulatory burden.
And the problem is, whenever you speak to people, they want to funnel out, you know, oh, and what about my credit cards and this, you know, and they want the whole financial planning piece. And if they're entry-level clients, you're trying to funnel the other way and simplify your or minimise your contact and use, you know, IT solutions and various other things. It can feel sometimes like you're opening a can of worms every time you know, if you want to truly help someone and look at all aspects of that. So I mean, to be honest, we follow Nick's view. Either there are higher end clients in our client service proposition, or we do pro bono work. We don't blur it in between. There isn't work that's not cost effective. You know, that's got to be cross-subsidised by the clients that are paying the agreed fees. Pro bono, absolutely fine. The guys have their volunteer days and they can go and do what they want and give, you know, and go into schools and do very basic, you know, education pieces and things like that. But not blurring the actual model.
We do find actually that the younger people, so people younger than me, there's quite a few of those, and they don't mind collaborating though. If you actually say to them, we can do this at this price on the understanding that you deliver this part of it. You know, when you go to Nando's, the first thing they do in Nando's is teach you how to serve yourself, because they're not going to do it. You know, so if you kind of let a client know that they're obliged to contribute to this process, and that if they don't want to do that, then it's probably not the service for them, they need a different service at a different price point, then we're hoping that, you know, we can make it work for them.
We'll have to leave it there, but thanks everyone, that was fascinating. I hope you found it as enjoyable as I did. If you'd like to find out more, we have a range of resources available on our website to help your business grow and prosper. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.